Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. Beloved sisters, beloved brothers, beloved friends, I salute you with the greeting that has been handed down to us by generations of devout seekers who at all times and all places have worshipped the One, the source of light, the source of righteousness, the source of everything, the all-merciful, the all-compassionate, Allah. The Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, once said, "Die, die, die before you die." And what does it mean to die before we die? It means to wake up before we die. And when do we have the possibility to die before we die? To wake up before we die? We do it during our prayer. The 5 daily prayer is a constant reminder to die before we die, to wake up before we die. It's a constant movement, mental and physical movement between Tawheed and multiplicity. When we place our forehead on the ground, we try to die a little bit. We try to leave this world behind. We try to leave our lower nafs behind. We try to leave our ambitions behind and to be close to the One. And when we stand up and we say, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu, we greet not only the angels, but we greet our sisters and brothers. And not only our Muslim sisters and brothers who stand so close to us on the Friday prayer so we can touch their shoulders. We also greet the foreigner, the stranger, the Christian, the Jews. So the prayer where we die before we die every day, 5 times a day, is a constant reminder that we cannot claim to love Allah or to understand Tawheed if we do not accept and embrace the multiplicity that Allah has created. So, Allah has created a world of multiplicity because Allah wants us to want multiplicity so as to understand Allah's unity. Die before we die is also expressed in the declaration of faith in Shahada. Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah wa ashhadu anna Muhammadan Rasul Allah. What does it mean to say Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah? It means that we have to negate before we can confirm. We as Muslims, we have to negate before we can confirm. And what is it that we have to negate? We have to negate ignorance, first of all. We also have to negate uncertainty. And what does it mean that when we negate uncertainty? It doesn't mean that we are not allowed to doubt, to make mistakes, but it means that we have to develop the methodology of the heart. We have to understand that only the heart can understand and embrace what the mind cannot embrace, because the heart transforms, whereas the mind binds. We also have to be willing to follow Allah when we are tested. And we are all tested, and we all get a share of sorrow and happiness. We just lost one of our brothers in the Mariam Mosque. He was 31 years old. He was one of the brothers who laid the fundament for the Mariam Mosque together with all the women. He was 31 years old. So we are all tested. And I remember the words of a Syrian refugee, a woman who lost her 4 children, her husband, her country, her parents. She lost all this in the war in Syria. And she said once, when I had my family beside me, and my 4 children and my parents, I was working as a teacher, I was happy. I never asked Allah, why me? And now I lost everything, and I never asked Allah, why me? That's the certainty of the heart. That's tawakkul. That's to believe and to trust Allah, also when we are tested. So all these things are implemented, and the essence in the Shahada, in the declaration of faith. And today, I'm going to take you on a journey. I'm going to take you on a journey into the institutionalization of Islamic feminism in a very concrete form. I'm going to take you on a journey on how to create a mosque with female imams. And I'm going to focus on the negation of ignorance, because before we can confirm, we have to negate ignorance. And what does it mean to negate ignorance? It means to implement justice, to implement equal rights in our daily lives. How come that we as Muslims all over the world have normalized patriarchal structures within our religious institutions? How come that we have normalized patriarchal structures, patriarchal readings of the Quran? Because the first step is to negate ignorance. So this is the journey that I'm going to take you on. It's 1999. I'm doing my thesis on Sufism and Islamic activism in Syria and Damascus. And I'm sitting in the Abu Nur Mosque. The Grand Mufti of Syria, Sheikh Ahmed Kuftaru, was the Grand Mufti at that time. And I remember I was sitting at the balcony looking at the Grand Mufti through the glass, together with all these great women beside me. I was studying his khutbah, and I was studying the tafsir of the women in the mosque. And there, back in 1999, in Syria and Damascus, I had my first vision of a mosque with female imams. I started to think, what would it be like? What would it feel like if the Grand Mufti was a woman? Or if the Imam was a woman? And I came back to Denmark, and I founded the first association with a female Muslim leadership. I wrote my first article about the necessity of creating a mosque with female imams. And at that time, I didn't use the term imam, I used the term khatiba, because I knew that it would be too daring to use the term imam. And it took us 15 years to reach to the point where we are today. So the Mariam Mosque in Copenhagen was not a bright idea we had 4 years ago. It has been 15 years in its making. It's 2016, and I'm preparing myself to lead the first Friday prayer in the Mariam Mosque together with Saliha Maria Fete. I'm putting on my scarf and my galabia, this same dress that I'm wearing now. It's a present from my father, who is a political refugee from Syria. And my 4 children, they were standing beside me, watching me. And they knew that something was at stake, because they had been witnessing all the arguments around the dinner table for the last 2 years. So they knew that today a group of activists would write history in Copenhagen. And my youngest daughter had a friend visiting our house. It was a non-Muslim Danish girl. And she whispered in my daughter's ears, "What is an imam?" And I will never forget the look in Halima's eyes. She was 5 years old, and she said very proudly, "Don't you know, an imam is a woman who's doing great things." So it is possible to change the structure, and it really gave me a lot of hope. And she's absolutely right. Female imams is not a new phenomenon. At the time of the Prophet in Medina, peace be upon him, at that time we didn't have official mosques as we know them today. We had house mosques. And in the very first house mosque in the Islamic civilization, that was the house mosque of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, we know of at least 2 women who led the prayer for other women after the death of the Prophet. That was Aisha and Salama. And we also know the story of the Prophet visiting Waraka and asking her to lead the prayer for her household, because she was the most excellent in reciting and she was the most knowledgeable in Islam. So where do we find these stories that are left untold? We find them many places. Ibn Sa'd, a historian from the 8th century, has written a biographical lexicon called Kitab al-Tabaqat al-Kabir. It consists of 8 volumes. The 7 volumes are about the men who followed the Prophet in Medina, and the 8th volume is only about the women. And it is within this 8th volume that you will find these stories left untold. Stories that emphasizes that creating a mosque with a female leadership, with female imams, is not a reformation. It's actually to go back to the roots, to go back to the sources, to go back to the practice at the time of the Prophet, peace be upon him. So what happened? How come that we today in 2019, how come that some Muslims, some places, deny women the basic right to enter the chair, to deliver the khutbah, or to lead the prayer? There are various reasons for this, and one of them is the fact that the second Caliph, Omar, in 634, when he came to power, he denied women to lead the prayer for other women. When you start a mosque with female imams, as we did in Copenhagen in 2016, you get the question of legitimacy. How dare you start a mosque? Who gives you the legitimacy to take upon you the title Imam? My father asked me the same question. He got a message from a family member in Syria who saw the Mariam Mosque on the Syrian news, and he said that Sherin is one of the imams in the mosque. This is impossible. And my father called me and he said, you have to denounce the title. You can call yourself anything else. Call yourself a sociologist of religion and philosophy, call yourself a murshidat, call yourself a khatiba. You cannot take the title Imam. And I told my father why, and he said, in order to call yourself an Imam, you need to be able to recite the Quran by heart fully. And you need to understand, or you have to put on your hijab all the time, not only when you conduct prayer. So my father didn't speak to me for a month, and my father is a feminist. He's an Islamic feminist. He introduced me to Sufi literature since I was a very young girl. He used to recite Ibn Arabi, "The perfect man is a woman." But it was actually not about his own conviction. It was about understanding the community. So you get the question of legitimacy, and our legitimacy in the Maurya Mosque is based on need and knowledge, and Islamic theology. What does the Quran say about female imams? It doesn't say anything, but it says that both men and women should seek knowledge, and that men and women are equal in the eyes of Allah. 3 out of 4 law schools allow female imams leading the prayer for other women. So Islamically, there is not a contradiction, and it's absolutely safe theologically to establish a mosque with female imams. What do you need? What does it require to become a female imam? Because we don't have an imam education in Denmark. In the Mariam Mosque, we set up our own rules, our own standards. So in the Mariam Mosque, you need to have a master at least, or a PhD in Islamic studies, religion, Arabic language. You need to take courses at the university, at the Faculty of Theology in Islamic Spiritual Care, because being an imam is mostly and primarily about Islamic spiritual care. You also need to know how to recite. You need to understand the language of Arabic. And you need to enter our Islamic Academy, where we offer 17 courses in Islamic philosophy, Sufism, Islamic feminism, Quran, Islamic law, etc. But we also allow young women who have been reciting the Quran since they were 4 years old to enter the mosque and lead the prayer if they are excellent in the science of tajweed. So we also make exceptions. The most important question is the question of needs. What are the needs today in our societies? And if people did not seek the Mariam Mosque, we wouldn't have any kind of legitimacy. So the question of need is, of course, crucial. Some of the most important needs in our societies today is the talk about interfaith marriage, women's lack of the right to divorce, and I would like to focus on these two topics. In the Mariam Mosque, we have developed 9 theses of Muslim reform based on Islamic principles of justice. So these are based on Islamic principles of justice. We already implemented 7 out of 9 theses in our daily practices. Today, many women, Muslim women around the world, do not have the basic right to divorce because some Muslim leaders took out the women's right to divorce of the marriage contract. In Denmark, only 2 Muslim communities have implemented women's right to divorce in the Islamic marriage contract, and the Mariam Mosque is one of them. We have constructed a new Islamic marriage contract that gives women the right to divorce. Polygamy is forbidden. If mental or physical violence occur, the marriage is annulled. And we also made a fusion between Danish legislation and Islamic guidance, which means that if you are divorced according to Danish law, you are instantly divorced Islamically. But we know that it's a fact that some women marry only according to Islamic guidance and not according to Islamic law. And we have conducted Islamic divorces or performed Islamic divorces to women who were subjected to severe violence and also their children, but they were not able to obtain a divorce because the husband refused. So we have to solve the dilemma or the problem of women's lack of the right to divorce in our communities. And some of you might think, especially the non-Muslims, why is this important? Because it's only European law that counts. But it is important because even though it's only European law that counts legally, the Islamic marriage, it counts spiritually, religiously, and psychologically for the people who believes in Allah. So, we have conducted Islamic divorces. And our aim is to standardize the Islamic marriage contract that we have constructed. And our aim and hope is that male leaders and male imams all over the world will consider implementing Muslim women's right to divorce in the marriage contract. And it's an Islamic principles. The second theme is the theme of interreligious marriage. I myself, I have 4 children. I have 2 boys and 2 girls. My boys are 9 and 11, and my girls are today 7 and 14 years old. What are the chances that my 2 girls will grow up one day and maybe fall in love with a non-Muslim? It's huge because we live in Denmark, we live in Europe. And the father of my children, he will argue that it's never going to happen because he says, I, as a father, have raised my children so well so they will not even think about marrying a non-Muslim. They will not even dream about marrying a non-Muslim. And this point of view is not rare. You find it among religious Muslims, religious Jews, religious Christians. The rabbi in Denmark, the Jewish rabbi, he would say exactly the same thing. He would say religious Jews do not dream about falling in love with non-Jews because they know it's not a possibility. So we have normalized in our religious communities, we have normalized the notion of not to fall in love across religious boundaries. In the Quran, it is stated clearly that a Muslim man can marry a Jew or a Christian or people from the book, but it is not stated clearly that a woman can do the same, and it is not stated clearly that she can't. And we use that as our legitimacy. It is stated, though, in the Quran that both men and women should seek and find devoted seekers of the One. In the Mariam Mosque, I have conducted more than 30 Islamic marriages over the last 2 years, and half of these marriages are interfaith marriages between practicing faithful Muslim women and practicing Christian men. And the first couple that came to our mosque was a couple from Norway. And she was a practicing Muslim and he was a practicing Christian. And they known each other for 6 years, and both families on both sides accepted the marriage. But the community did not accept the marriage, and they couldn't find an imam who would conduct the Islamic marriage. And the woman could not enter a marriage without the Islamic marriage. We have couples coming from Norway, Sweden, Denmark, UK, France, Egypt, because still in our societies, love across religious boundaries is something strange, and there is a consensus that this is not a possibility. So, we can have a lot of conferences and we can meet year after year, but things will stay the same until we as Muslims decide to become agents on the ground. Our Vice President just published a book on Islamic philosophy. He has a PhD in Islamic philosophy. And his book on Islamic philosophy has entered the curriculum at the university, at the Faculty of Philosophy. So for the first time in Danish history, students will be introduced to Islamic philosophy. And this is how we become agents on the ground. We have a new generation of Muslims who have placed themselves on the knowledge production. And slowly, we are able to challenge the growing Islamophobia by writing new narratives on Islam in Europe. And the growing Islamophobia and the growing anti-Islamic rhetoric and propaganda is also one of the theses of reform. And we do believe that it's possible to change the narrative on Islam in Europe and to challenge the growing Islamophobia. I will end my session by a story. My 2 boys, they love to play chess, and recently I asked them, do you know the meaning of the word checkmate? And they said no. And I told them that checkmate descends either from the Persian Shah Mat or the Arabic Sheikh Mat. And my daughter, who is 14 years old, Aisha, she said, be aware, Muslim brothers, the Sheikh is dead, long live the female Imams. Thank you.